Hello. Once again, it's a pleasure really for me to be here with you, to listen to the best practices that you, different companies are sharing here. And I also am very happy for giving this opportunity. So thank you for Huawei HR for giving me the opportunity also to share the practice that we do believe that is the best practice in Phillip Morris. So I'm usually here in Armenia, but you guess that I don't speak Armenian, so hope that it won't be a big barrier in understanding what I'm sharing. Many companies are striving to build a high-performance culture, and Phillip Morris is one of them. Today I'm going to share with you our story of how we are changing our culture into a high-performance culture. Before I want to start with a small history of Phillip Morris. The history of Phillip Morris accounts for up to 2 centuries. We started our operations in 1874 when the first cigarette store opened in London. Since then, we were developing our business, becoming the huge, giant cigarette company with the leading world brands. But in 2016, this is a year like a turning point in the history of Phillip Morris. This is a year of the transformation journey. Transformation from the giant cigarette company into the technological and innovative company, the primary purpose of which was to build smoke-free future. And, back. Unless I will learn how to navigate and do this. So with research and development centers and more than 900 engineers, we developed a new product, not a conventional cigarette, but alternative to the conventional cigarette, that is a better alternative to it. This is how the new product, 𝐏𝐞𝐫𝐿, appeared in the market, which serves actually our bigger purpose, smoke-free future. I mentioned this story because transformation is the foundation of what I'm gonna share with you today. The transformation and the passion toward this change impacted the way how we used to work before. It impacted the way we work externally. It impacted the way we are working internally. And of course, the product itself was changed. What we knew by that time was that, of course, the whole organization knew how to work with conventional cigarettes, but not with the devices. There was so much unknown. There were so many questions we didn't have answers for, that we needed to find answers to those questions. We had to find solutions. And for that, we had to experiment, test, validate, adjust, and again to experiment. That's how we stepped out. Actually, this thinking pushed us to step out from the functional thinking towards project-based work. In order to drive transformation and innovation in the company, we need to change the culture, which will be supporting the change. We all know the well-known saying of Peter Drucker, that culture eats strategy for breakfast. And that's exactly what's happening with many companies who fail to execute the strategy just because they do not have the culture supporting the change. So how does culture need to change to support transformation? It needs to support innovation, rapid adaptation, because everything around is changing so fast. And of course, it needs to support organizational resilience. We identified 3 pillars of change. It's habits of mind. We realized that we need the behaviors which were supporting or which could support the new culture a new thinking in the company. Leaders is the second pillar, who are enablers of the change. And the third pillar is the learning mindset. We needed to create the learning mindset because in a transformation and during the change, you need to rebuild, you need to upskill and reskill the whole organization. What is the burning platform driving the change? What we use as a platform? The answer is performance management. Because it helps us, it literally catches all pillars of the change which I mentioned about. So you probably guessed that the company with such a huge history already has a performance management system. It cannot be otherwise. But not necessarily the system or the process that was supporting the change in the company. We realized that we were too much result-driven. That was demonstrated in our performance management system. We realized that we have tangible, what KPIs, but behaviors were missing. Actually, behaviors which are fundamental and instrumental in driving the change in the company. So that's how we identified three competencies, so to say, which behaviors which could support the change in the company. And that's exactly how it embodied, it appeared in our performance appraisal and our performance management. This is how we ended up with two ratings, one on what, meaning what we are planning to achieve, and the second rating on how we are gonna achieve those targets, which is equally important for us. Driven by results, it was some kind of competition, marathon for objective settings. We realized that the whole company was setting big number of objectives, and that cannot work in the changing environment. We started to focus on a limited number of the objectives. Actually, we limited it, yes, on what number? 3 to 5. And before it was 20, 30. So we limited just to keep the right balance on what we are doing, and to have time to stop, to rethink, revisit objectives, and adjust accordingly. We started to meet frequently. You see the word checkpoint. So this is like a quarterly meeting where we are revisiting those objectives, share with our employees and understand where do they stand and how they can progress and grow further. This is one thing that I think is also important, because people are basically fail to perform because there is lack of understanding what is expected from them. This is exactly what checkpoints helps us to do. We use these checkpoints, though, as a platform for feedback, because real-time feedback is really needed. It's necessary for development, for learning. I mentioned that learning and development is one pillar of the change. Moreover, with millennials, who will be forming 75% of the workforce globally by 2025, they will not be attracted by the companies whose culture provides little, if any, developmental opportunities. We realized that top-down feedback, top-down meaning following from the manager, was not working. It was not supporting learning and development. That's how we just took out the whole power from, in this regards of course, whole power from the manager and gave this power to employee. Now the employee was on the driver's seat and not the manager. The employee was accountable and responsible for her career and development. They are the ones, employees themselves, who are requesting feedback, assessing themselves, and requesting feedback from various stakeholders in the company. That helps them to get a comprehensive picture on where they stand, where do they fail, and where they need to develop and grow. What are these opportunities? Forced distribution is the other pillar. Before we had forced distribution of ratings. It's just when you are pushed to give ratings according to some quotas per each rating. We realize that transformation culture needs synergy, needs innovative culture, and this forced distribution, it just creates destruction, it just creates more competition in the company that is killing creativity. So don't let your processes, even if they are used for years, to kill the success of the new strategy and culture. I already mentioned that we use a lot of feedback gathered from various stakeholders. And then the team of managers is using this feedback for calibrating the employees, their individual performance at calibration session, which is the heart of the whole performance. We believe that calibration sessions help us to minimize or avoid biases and wrong ratings. This is a session where we're setting some standard of performance which brings more fairness, objectivity, and trust from the side of the employees. We all love useful information that helps us to do our job better. We have this information, but we don't need to keep it for ourselves. This is information that is for people, for employees. So that's exactly what we're doing. We're sharing this feedback that is then helps us to develop individual development plan. That is the core and the basic fundamental for the development of the people. Last but not least, performance, of course, is linked to merit increase. We are rewarding employees based on their performance. We are rewarding the top performers, and I think it's quite fair, right? In order to differentiate the performance of the company. But there is one thing we have to take into consideration. People treat and perceive feedback differently when it is linked to merit and promotion. That's why we're not discussing these two in one session. We're splitting, we're dedicating one meeting to purely just development, performance discussion, and the other meeting, even after 2 or 3 months, is dedicated to merit increase. What are the supporting tools for promoting this culture? Of course, we are using all these tools, trainings to learn, to share how to do feedback, what is the process about, how to minimize biases, and etc. Coaching of leaders, how to lead with a coaching style. We're using pulse surveys 3 times a year, which helps us to identify the gaps in the organization, in the performance, in the leadership. And last but not least is communication. Constant, continuous communication on business results, on processes, on various things that help to bring this transparency to the organization. If you're changing the culture, if you're on the same journey, you have to take into consideration that it requires a good strategy. It requires a good culture which will be supporting this change. And of course, the second thing you need is the patience. Because it's a process. It's quite a long process. And it's not an overnight event. I just want to share with you in one slide, again, very briefly, to sum up what I said about the changes we did in the company. So first, we started with introduction of the behaviors, new behaviors supporting the change in the company. We embodied our part into the performance management system, into evaluation, so it wasn't only what you achieved, but how you achieved it. With a limited number of objectives, no 10, 15, 3 to 5 only, and adjust if needed. We started to provide continuous, real-time feedback. Multi-rater is another change. Multi-rater meaning 360 assessments requested from various stakeholders in the company. And we refused from forced distribution, made it more fair, not depending on the quotas allocated, and huge focus on individual development plan. What are the results, probably you ask? I just brought a few of them. With this strategy, we increased our ENPS by 35%. In average, you see all the other dimensions like leadership behavior, like understanding and clarity on the transformation on the way we are moving to. What is the destination? On understanding the performance, it increased by 11%. And you're seeing that employees with objectives, the full population is covered with objectives. We're very proud with these results. But there is, of course, a room for improvement, definitely. But these results give us some confidence that we're doing the right things and we're in the right direction. So we need to still continue focusing on the same things. But there's no silver bullet how to do it right. Don't copy-paste or abolish your processes. In order to create something valuable, you need to understand what is your destination, dream destination. What needs to be fixed? It's all about how you people feel and where the problem sits. All people, all of us deserve to know where do we stand and how to improve and how to develop. It's all about saying the truth to the employees. And it's all about building the trust. So these are the main things that I would just like to share with you. That's think clean. Try to find the issue, the problem, and then experiment, test, validate, and again experiment if needed. This is the only formula, I think, that can be successful. And yes, if you want to learn about the culture, then listen to stories like the story of Phillip Morris I shared with you. But if you want to change your culture, change your stories. Thank you.
Քանի որ մենք ունենք ընդհանրին մամլեք հարցի հնարավորություն, օգնել դահլիճից ունեն հարց, որ ուզում են ուղղել Նինո Բակարաշվիլի։ Դահլիճից հարցեր, այսօր ում տեսնենք դահլիճից ունենք հարցեր, մենք այսօր հարց ունենք, խնդրում եմ խոսափող մոտեցնենք։ Մենք ունենալու ենք նշում, որ ընթացքում դուք հասցնեք շփվել, մենք հարցը հիմնականացի, որից հետո միջման ընթացքում կհասցնենք ձեզ հետ շփվել։ Խնդրեմ ձեր հարցը։
Thank you so much. My name is from Central Bank of Armenia. Thank you very much for a very efficient presentation. Change is very important in vital and yes, culture is very important change. What happened with the people who were resistant to change? So I would like to I'm interested. Thank you.
So as I said, thank you for the question first of all. As I said, it was a process, right? It didn't happen overnight, right? I can't remember the person who left the company because the culture or the things we were requesting was so distant for them. Because it was, you remember what was the transformation? It was for serving the smoke for future. On the contrary, we as a company became even more attractive because we're serving the bigger purpose mission for the humanity. So it's all about, as I said, flexibility, adaptation, and learning. And millennials are just striving to learn, and they are the bigger part in our company. So honestly, I do not remember even a single person who just left the company or we were forced, to terminate just because they didn't fit the culture. Probably the only reason was that they couldn't speed up enough to changing requirements in terms of the reskilling or upskilling. This is a different story, but not about the culture, right? It's a part of the culture, it's a consequence of this change, definitely, but not because they were uncomfortable with the culture. So of course these things happen, but the company is doing, as I said, with the individual development plans. There's so much effort to do from the companies. There's so much investment in this. Either it is online learning or offline, just to support. Termination is just a really last destination. It's a really last thing that comes to the mind because we understand the transformation. It's a painful at the beginning process. It's difficult, and we all, not them we're talking about, but all, each and every of us has to adapt and adjust. And for various people, it takes various time. I hope I answered your question. There is no black or white.